This episode was sponsored by Blue Fire from Graffiti Games and Roby Studios. Hi guys, welcome back to SwitchUp. Remember, we give away a free Nintendo Switch game each and every month to the subscriber that, well, the one that we choose really. So make sure you're active, you've got your notifications, all that, just click all the buttons and see what happens. I'm feeling a bit sorry for myself today because I had one of those ocular migraines. If you've ever had one, you basically go blind for a little bit and it's just agony. I tried making this earlier and I couldn't actually see the screen. And we've got some brilliant reviews coming next week, so yeah, make sure those notifications are definitely on. Right, so let's have a look at what games are worth picking up in this sale and which ones you should avoid because they're terrible. What's worth buying? Let's find out. First up, we've got a game called Sword of the Necromancer, which just released on January the 28th. It's a single or two-player roguelite title that has a typical top-down approach, but there are a number of interesting mechanics here, and I guess this can almost act like my review as we didn't get to cover it. When you kill an enemy, you can then reanimate them using necromancy and assign them to one of the slots down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. You can basically bring them out when you want and use them like a companion. If they're slain, then they're lost, but if you manage to keep them alive by using them tactically and ensuring they don't bite a bullet, they can also level up and gradually improve. And it's quite distressing when one of your favourites finally takes a dirt nap. Another thing I really like about this roguelite is that each time you play through, much like something like Hades, the story gradually unfolds, and it's got a very well voice acted storyline that actually makes sense and has really good cutscenes. When you die in a run as well, you don't lose everything, you retain half the level you've gained, and there are loads of different weapons. It's a reasonable price anyway, but I think you might as well pick it up at 10% off, which takes it down to 12 quid, and that goes on until February the 27th. It's got a 1 gig download, obviously 1 to 2 player co-op, and it's a title you could plumb, well, a lot of time into. Next, we've got the sponsor of this video, and one that I just really wanted to include because I reviewed it the other day and I'd say it's well worth picking up at its reduced price. It's Blue Fire, which is essentially a combination of a few different games. It's as if you got Hollow Knight, Zelda and a Souls title and then squash them all together into one little package. Well, actually it's not too little. I've got a full review of this on the channel, I'll pop a link to it down in the description. But what it does really well is, well, 3D platforming. It takes what you typically experience in Hollow Knight from a 2D plane and puts it into the 3D, but with a decent amount of control. It's a Metroidvania, so as you go through, you unlock loads of different skills, double jumps, the ability to use your sword almost like a helicopter to stay off the ground, and you can also wall run. It's very slick, it's nice and quick. And I know these developers have been, I think, taken aback really by the amount of love the game's received. As I say, check out my review, that will give you all the good, the bad and everything else you need to know about it, but it's one I'd recommend picking up. All the links to it as well will be down in the description. Next up then, and coming from one of my favourite developers, or I should say publishers, it's Knights and Bikes, which is published by Double Fine and developed by Foam Sword Games. It's a bike riding adventure game. You can play single or with co-op and a friend locally, and it's super quirky. It's very, very cool, this game. I like it a lot. The art style is interesting, the dialogue between the characters is entertaining, and you'll play as Nessa and Demelza, who are going around exploring an ancient island on those sweet little push bikes. Oh, and they've got a pet goose called called Captain Honkers. Of course he is. You can upgrade those bikes as well, and it's not the longest. It's about 8 to 10 hours. But to be honest, do you need a really, really long game? Would you rather have a game that's a reasonable length, that's decent? And I think this is it. You can do online with a friend as well if you haven't got any friends locally. I don't know why I laughed at that. It's got a download size of 3.3 gigs, and that sale goes on until February the 15th. I struggled to say that one. 33% off. Call of Juarez Gunslinger is currently 50% off, taking it down to 9 quid, which is the cheapest it's ever been. I reviewed this on the channel, I really enjoyed it. It's developed by Techland and they also publish it, but it looks decent, performance is good, and yes, you know what I'm going to say, they included gyroscopic aiming, which I know not everyone likes, but you're wrong and you should use it for the precise headshots. You'll be much better. It's got HD rumble as well, and yeah, it's held up quite nicely. Obviously it's a slightly older title. It was re-released on Switch, but yeah, I think it's really good. You'll be hunting down legendary outlaws and the whole thing plays out almost like a tall tale told by the main protagonist. God, that was a tongue twister. It's 2.6 gigs. It's going to take you around about 10 hours to complete, maybe 15 if you want to find everything, and that sale goes on until February the 25th. Alright, next we've got the brilliant Hand of Fate 2. This combines deck building and an action-adventure game where you'll actually be going and fighting different creatures between rounds. It's very cool. It describes itself as a dungeon crawler, but it has that board game-esque feel to it where in between the different fights, those different cards are drawn and then that affects the encounters that you'll have to do battle within. I'm sure some people will let you know down in the comments, but I would suggest checking out our review of this one because I know Glen really enjoyed it and was quite surprised actually by how in-depth it was and how enjoyable. But also worth noting, there's actually 3 different DLC packs available for it, so you can definitely continue your adventure on the Switch version. It's got a 3.7 gig download, but potentially 50 to 100 hours of gameplay. It's well worth it. It's 55% off, taking it down to £10, and that sale goes on until February the 18th. When you hear that Yuzo Koshiro contributed to the soundtrack, then you've got to take note. The Takeover is a game probably that Glen, if he hasn't got it already, should own. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up in the classic style that doesn't try and reinvent the wheel, but actually, to make a decent beat-em-up isn't as easy as you'd think. Little details like collision, the stage design itself, and then I guess the aesthetic, all have to come together in just the right way for it to feel fluid and work. And while the Takeover isn't as good as something like Streets of Rage 4, it's still a very good beat-em-up and well worthy of your time if you're a fan of the genre. You can play with a friend in co-op as well, as you'd expect, and the stages have got a real punchy colour palette to them, and that really sounded like the worst pun ever. It was not intended, my word. You're looking at a 1.9 gigabyte download, and at that 50% off, $10 until February the 18th. Now, while I really enjoyed Vigil, The Longest Night, it had some serious bugs at launch. Like, it was ridiculous. I had characters appearing without bodies and all sorts of nonsense. I revisited it after a couple of patches and it was much better, and I'd say it was a recommend then. But it's actually seen even more work now, and I know the developers are still working hard on the game to bring new content to it. It's currently 20% off, which isn't a huge drop, but I think you'll know probably from the style and what I say next if the game's for you. Now, essentially, it is like a Souls-like. From the side perspective, think along the lines of Salt and Sanctuary, and you've got kind of an idea of how this one plays out. There's a town area, so you can do a bit of shopping, do different quests for several different people, as well as a fast travel system for jumping back and forward. There's a little bit of platforming thrown in here. I guess in general the movements are quite a lot quicker than Salt and Sanctuary, although in all honesty I probably prefer that game overall. What I really liked here was some of the boss fights, and there's also a large skill tree to work your way through, and the art style was actually based on Chinese paper cutting, so it's quite distinctive, and I thought it was pretty decent. It's got a 5.3 gigabyte download, and that sale goes on until February the 22nd. Oh, and it's going to take about 30 to 50 hours to complete. From a game that's quite dark and, let's be honest, a bit miserable, to one that is the complete opposite and might remind you of another very popular title that has a very similar style, and it's The Big Journey. I absolutely loved it. You play as a cat rolling through the world, except you rotate the world rather than the cat, and then you can jump around, and yeah, it's like a puzzle platform adventure. It's got lovely music. It's not a very long game. It's reasonably short, but for $2 or your regional equivalent at 75% off, that's probably about bang on, really. There are 6 different worlds to work your way through. It's super chill gameplay as well, very relaxing. And yeah, there's not much more I can say. You can probably tell from the visuals exactly how it plays. And if you're after just a cutesy little puzzle platformer, you can do a lot worse than this. It's only 697 megabytes, and it will put a smile on your face. This one's only on sale in the US region, so don't go looking for it in the UK and get upset. But it's Immortals Fenyx Rising. It's 40% off, and it's really panned out to be, in my opinion, one of Ubisoft's best games in quite some time in terms of creating a really enjoyable world to play in. It's full of Greek mythology, loads of side quests, but also side content, so you don't find yourself overly bored in the world, which can be very real in some of these open world games. For those of us that have finished the game, I know I would really like for it to sell well enough that Ubisoft don't just drop it and have it as a one-hit wonder, because I think they're onto something by branching out from the Assassin's Creed titles, which, don't get me wrong, I really enjoy. It's just nice to have something new. It's also had a number of updates since launch, so it plays much better. I think it could still do with a tiny little bit of tweaking, but it's fine for me in all honesty. It's a Nintendo Switch. I'm not really sure what people expected, but this was far beyond what I expected when I first got the console. It's got a download size of 15 gigs, and you're looking at about 50 to 60 hours to complete and do everything. And I believe A New God DLC has actually launched. It was supposed to launch in January the 28th, so I guess that's already out. You'll have to let me know down in the comments. And there's another DLC due towards the end of the year called Myths of the Eastern Realm. A really good game, and yeah, that sale goes on until February the 19th. Let's finish up the recommendations then with one I haven't mentioned in quite some time, and it's Starlink Battle for Atlas. But this is the deluxe edition, which in the US at the moment is 70% off. It's about $20, which really is, it's just a complete steal. Yes, it does very often drop in price, but it was a shame this one because it launched, it was really good, but for some reason it just didn't capture a lot of people's attention, and so it dropped in price so quickly. In fact, quite similar to Immortals that we've just looked at. If you'd rather just go for the digital edition, that's only $14.99 and obviously has just the base game, but it's still well worth it. You're trying to free the Atlas star system from Grax and his Forgotten Legion, who are essentially a load of robots. But comparisons were made to things like No Man's Sky and dropping in and out of the different planets and the feel of the combat. It's really quite an accomplished game. You can play as Fox McCloud as well if you so choose, and it's a decent length. You're looking potentially 40 to 70 hours of gameplay, and you can play with a friend as well. It's got a 16.3 gig download, and that sale goes on until February the 19th. Okay, now we're going to look at two games that you should avoid because the mere mention of them makes your micro SD card hop out and try and escape. And first up is the aptly named Dear God. That's D-E-E-R God, but it might as well not be. It describes itself as a breathtaking 3D pixel art adventure that will challenge your religion, but it turns out it doesn't challenge anything other than your patience because the gameplay is appalling. When I looked at this and saw screenshots, I thought this is going to be really good fun, I was going to have a great time with it, but I didn't at all. I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was lackluster in almost every department, and living as a deer and surviving as a deer, it just, well, no, felt like I should have been shot. That's a terrible thing to say. I actually feel bad about that one. Quick, let's move on. A game that's currently on sale is Bakugan Champions of Vestroia. And this is, there's very, very few games where I've reviewed it. You're trying to be very fair. You're trying to break down these scores and review it and blah, blah, blah. And you guys know, you can kind of tell sometimes that I personally don't like the game, but it does have redeeming qualities that I then have to give a okay-ish score for that area. But this one, yeah, hindsight is a wonderful thing. Nah, awful. It's terrible. It's a terrible game. No, it's terrible. I think, yeah, if I were to re-review this, and I wouldn't often say this, but if I were to re-review this, I'd be cutting that gameplay score right down. I mean, it was low anyway. I think I gave it something like 12 out of 20. But yeah, no, it's just so bad. There's no replayability. There's no real skill. It's just, they created Headless Chick in the game. It actually upsets me to talk about this one. Let's forget about it. Come on, let's go. All right, so that's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed the sales video. Remember, please do subscribe and do all of the other stuff. We give away a free Switch game each every month. We have an amazing Discord community. The link to that's down in the description. I think there's over 1,000 members on there now. People are always setting up games for maybe older titles where they can't find anyone online. There's rooms for places like Duke Nukem, Hypercharge Unbox, and you'll also find a guy on there called Jagger who will try and wind you up at every opportunity. Absolutely perfect. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya!